Okay, one way to look at advanced defensive driving. Um, Let me start off with an example. It's very easy to tell somebody, hey, watch out for that side street. A car could pop out from that side street. I remember I used to do it 10 years ago when I started teaching. I would tell students, hey, watch out for that side street. Somebody could pop out there. And again, that's the first step in defensive driving is acknowledging the risk. That's great. Nothing wrong with it. Excellent. It's identifying the risk. Um, but then I used to think, well, what would I do if it actually happened? I mean, what would we do, especially if a student was driving? What would we do? So I started thinking about the options to avoid a collision with something, whatever it is. It could be, you could say, watch out for the bicyclist. A bicyclist could pop out here. Or it could be a car door opening. Watch out, somebody parked along the street here, the car door could open up. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And so, but the first step is, of course, acknowledging risk. And of course, you can't do that if you're speeding, texting, or tailgating. Speeding, texting, or tailgating, the big three that prevents you from acknowledging risk. And of course, there's other reasons too. But acknowledging risk, first step. But then I would always say, well, what would we do if it actually happened? So then I start going a little deeper. I said, okay, well, let's say there's a side street and you're worried about somebody popping out on a side street. You might say, well, if somebody pops out there, I'm going to slam on my brakes. Okay. Is there any potential problems with that? I guess there could be a rear end collision. Okay, we definitely don't want to slam on our brakes and get rear ended, but we might have to. You might have to. But, when we see that risk and we say, hey, somebody could pop out on the right and I might want to hit my brakes, well, then we check our rear view mirrors and see if we have that option. Okay. But again, see, that's going one step beyond. Simply identifying a side street and saying somebody could pop out. That's good. But it's kind of like, well, what would you do if that actually happened? Well, I'd slam on my brakes. Okay, so we better check our rearview mirror. So essentially, what you've done is you've identified a potential problem where the solution might be to slam on your brakes, and you might say, hey, let me check in back of me, make sure I can slam on my brakes safely. That's a tough scenario. I mean, there's a lot of variables with that. Speed of the vehicle, size of the vehicle, things like that. So there's a lot of this is just a kind of a general overview of how it works. Of course, there's always going to be variables or other factors that might change the strategy a little bit. So let's say you do look in your rearview mirror and you are being tailgated. You say, well, I don't really want to slam on my brakes, but if I have to, I guess I have to. Well, let's say, well, if I slam on my brakes, would I rather be rear-ended at 35 or 30, or 35 or 25? So you might say, okay, well, if I do have to slam on my brakes, maybe I'll just slow down a little bit. If anything, I should at least cover the brake, because covering the brake with my foot will increase my reaction time. So I have I have acknowledged the risk, and then my foot is covering the brake to increase my reaction time if I have to hit the brake. I might slow down a little bit too, so that if I do hit the brake and I do get rear-ended, I don't get rear-ended quite as bad. Now you might say, okay, this rear end stuff, that doesn't sound too good. Well, the other big option is swerve option. So you say, okay, well, I might swerve to the left if he's coming down the right. Okay, so that means that if you know that one of your options might be to swerve left, then maybe we should check to the left. So essentially, we've broken it down to a potential problem on the right. We could swerve, let's go to the left. Now, there could be millions of things on the right. It could be a bicyclist, a car door, a car popping out, a little kid. It doesn't matter. And you see, that's where I teach, not looking at things from a very specific point of view, like, hey, there could be a kid popping out. It's kind of like this. There's a street, somebody could come from it. I don't know whether it's a kid, a person on a scooter, a bicycle, an 18-wheeler. I don't know. But it's a street, and that's where people are coming from. Okay, and of course, that's what I teach also is the scanning technique of identifying where people are coming from and not cars. So, so you say there's a potential problem on the right. Can I go to the left? Okay. And then you say, okay, yeah, I can swerve to the left. But what if you can't? What if there's oncoming cars? For one, you should try to stagger it. If there is a potential problem on the right, you want to try to make sure you have that left swerve option. Like, let's say it's a bicyclist and you're going to go around the bicyclist. You want to make sure that there's no oncoming cars. Okay, sounds great. What if there is an oncoming car? Well, then you might say, okay, well, then I don't have a swerve option to the left. And it's kind of like, okay, well, if I don't have a swerve option to the left and there's a guy riding back of me, well, I'm certainly not swerving and having a head-on collision. So worst case scenario, or maybe best case scenario, I don't know, is I'll slow down, and if something does happen, I will hit the brakes, and hopefully, if I do get rear-ended, it's not a bad rear-end collision. And there's a lot of other things along with this. If you slow down, the guy in back of you will really look at you because they'll be like, what are you slowing down for? So great, you got his attention. You got that person's attention. So that's good if you slow down a little bit, because then they'll probably be annoyed. And of course, that's okay in driving. Okay, I don't mind annoying people in driving because it means that they're looking at me. Just as I might be really annoying right now and you're kind of like, trying to ignore me or whatever, but hey, you're paying attention. So it's hard to ignore somebody and do something else if somebody is in front of you and they're doing something annoying, like maybe slowing down. So a lot of people could say, well, I'm not going to slow down. Well, why won't you slow down a little bit? Well, because I'm going to be late for work. Okay, now that's a whole different issue. It's like, okay, there is a safety technique you can do to minimize the risk. Maybe, in fact, maybe you might not even slam on the brakes. Maybe it might be a situation where you just slow down a little bit, okay? Or it could be a situation where you say, you know what, there is an oncoming car on the left, but I do see I have a little bit of space. Maybe I'll just get over a couple feet to the left, okay? Even though there is an oncoming car, and definitely if there is no oncoming car, you get far to the left, because not only are you away from the danger, but if there's a visibility issue, you're helping visibility. Lane position affects visibility. It's a motorcycle thing where you say, hey, somebody could pop out on the right. I definitely don't want to get hit. Looks like it's open on the left. I'm going to stay to the left. You're away from danger. It minimizes that panic effect where you might get startled and swerve real hard and then you overcorrect and totally lose control. And if anything, if you do swerve, you're not swerving quite as much. Or same thing with braking. You say, well, I have a brake option, a little bit of a brake option. There's a guy in back of me. He's not hardcore tailgating, but maybe I'll slow down a little bit. So you're thinking about braking. You may be slowing down a little bit. You're covering the brake. And you might find out that if you do slam on the brake, you're not slamming on it as hard. And of course, if you get rear-ended, you're not getting rear-ended as hard. So as you can see, it gets pretty deep. We just keep going further and further into it. We say, what is the risk? First of all, where are people coming from? Where is the risk? What is the risk? What might we do in this situation? There's only a few things every living creature does to avoid a risk. And that is brake, or, slow down, swerve, maybe brake and swerve, and usually speed up. Okay, maybe speed up and swerve, but pretty much basic things, whether pushing a shopping cart or riding a bike or driving a car. To avoid collisions with other objects, most creatures do those things. So if you can start with those things and say, well, what if I slam on my brakes? Is it cool? Oh yeah, there's nobody in back of me, so somebody pops out, I can slam on my brakes. And then I say, okay, cool, okay, great, but guess what? I don't want to slam on my brakes. Just like with the swerve. Somebody could pop out on the right. Can you swerve to the left? Yeah, I can swerve to the left. Okay, well, I don't want to swerve to the left. We have that option. That's the emergency maneuver, but or what I call reactive defensive driving, but I don't want to do reactive. I want to do proactive defensive driving. I'd like to say, you know what, I can brake, I can swerve, or I can brake a little bit or something, but what can I do to avoid that in the first place? And a lot of it goes back to speed, lane position, following distance, being staggered spacing. You might say, hey, somebody could pop out on the right and I might swerve to the left. Okay, so we should check to the left. It's kind of like merging traffic. Hey, there could be an 18-wheeler merging. Rather than wait and say, okay, let's see if there's an 18-wheeler merging and then freaking out and saying, oh, shoot, I got to get over, we say, at least I teach, hey, there could be merging traffic. Can you get in the left lane if you have to? And then students say, yeah, I can. And they usually ask me, do I have to get in the left lane? And I say, well, we'll see. Let's check up the ramp. Nope, nobody's merging. Just stay right where you are. But it's like doing a pre-check to a lane change. But you have to at least acknowledge the risk and say, well, what if that does happen? What would I do? What's my best option? Well, obviously, if there's people merging on the freeway, your best option a lot of times is to get into that second lane. And then people might say, well, what if I can't get in that second lane? Well, that's where you've got to work on that. You've got to make sure you can get in that second lane. And if you can't get into the second lane for whatever reason, let's say everybody in that other lane is tailgating. One of the bad things about tailgating is there's no staggered positioning, so may not be able to get in that left lane. I teach how to help people merge so that even if you can't get in the left lane and there's still a lot of traffic merging, it's very easy to learn how to help people merge. But basically, that's it. Potential problem on the right. Can I go to the left? And of course, we even go one step further than that, because sometimes we won't even have time to identify the risk. So what I teach is always staggered positioning. So it's kind of like some people say, ooh, something's coming up here. Oh, I better make sure I can go to the left. That's cool. But in my opinion, it's kind of like, well, why don't you always make sure you can go to the left? Why don't you always make sure you're in staggered positioning? So you always have that option. So it's real simple. I teach a lot of follow-in distance for many different reasons, not just rear-ending the guy in front of you, economical, mechanical, and even environmental reasons to have follow-in distance. But follow-in distance covers the brake option, and staggered position covers the swerve option. Okay? So again, it goes back to, hey, what are those basic things that all creatures do to avoid risk? Well, a lot of times brake and swerve. Okay, let's make sure we have those options. Okay? And of course, a lot of people would say, well, what if I'm just hardcore tailgated? Well, slow down a little bit. A lot of times the people go around you. I mean, it's one of the simplest driving techniques you can do. Somebody's tailgating, you slow down just 1 or 2 miles per hour. They will hit a braking point and go around you. But then again, people say, well, I can't do that because I'm late for work or whatever. That's like, or I might miss a light. You know, if I have loads of following distance, I might miss a light. Or if I slow down, I might miss a light. Okay. That time management, okay. Work on that. I mean, that's such a huge factor. That's the biggest thing that works against all this defensive driving is simply being in a hurry. So anyways, this is a lot of information, and it's kind of a real quick summary. Again, there's a lot of variables in this situation. I didn't talk about what ifs, but that's kind of the general theme to the defensive driving that I teach. And again, I don't expect students to do that all the time, but I introduce them to that. I introduce them and I ask them, okay, what if somebody does come out on the right? What if there is a potential problem on the right or the left? What would you do? Because again, you'll notice that with a lot of people, and it's great. People will say, hey, watch out for the side street. Watch out for this. Watch out. That's great. That's identifying risk. But in order to be an advanced driver, you have to go one step further and say, okay, what would I do if it actually happened? What are my options? What's the best option? What's the worst option? And what can I do to prevent that emergency maneuver in the first place? Because I don't want to slam on my brakes and I don't want to swerve. So what can we do that might prevent the slamming on the brakes or swerving in the first place? That's the proactive part of it. And of course, part of the proactive part is just always maintaining good spatial distancing, where it's like following distance covers the brake, staggered position covers the swerve option. And that's another reason why UltraSafe is the safest driving school, is because we are constantly working on space management and identifying risk. We do not say, what's the chance of that? If we were at a four-way stop and it's our turn to go and somebody's coming, I do not tell a student, hey, trust that guy. He's got a stop sign. He's going to stop. Trust him. Go ahead and pull on out. We don't do that. We don't do that. If we get honked at, we get honked at, but we pull out when it's safe to pull out. We don't assume things. We're not pressured. We're not an assembly line driving school where we have to get students back by a certain time so we can load the car with a bunch more students and do another drive right afterwards. Our drives are very flexible. We can come back early or even 20, 30 minutes late sometimes. Fine with me. I love to teach. So, but this whole thing is just a real quick overview of how the training goes at UltraSafe. So, anyways, I hope that helps and hope it kind of explains why we're advanced in the advanced techniques. And of course, that's kind of the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot more to the defensive driving, but that's just an idea and kind of an overview of some of the bigger themes of how I teach and what students learn with UltraSafe. So anyways, thanks for your time, and hope you sign up. Thanks. Bye.